Expert insight, clear analysis, strategy in action. Welcome to the CEO to CEO podcast, featuring the world's top CEOs. The podcast will welcome honest conversations meant to challenge traditional ways of thinking from fellow global industry leaders. This podcast will also explore the intricate world of M&A from the insider's perspective. M&A is a big deal, one in which you can drive the future of your business, your industry, and even the trajectory of the marketplace. This podcast is hosted by Kevin Campbell, CEO of Syniti. Syniti is a global enterprise data solution provider specializing in data operations and data transformation. Kevin Campbell is a global champion in data and has served as the former Group Chief Executive Officer at Accenture and COO of Oscar Insurance Corporation. He brokered industry-leading acquisitions at EMC, including the acquisitions of RSA, VMware, and Dell, which still stands as the largest ever acquisition in the technology sector. On this week's podcast, we sit down with Joe Tucci, former chairman of the board of directors, president, and chief executive officer of EMC Corporation, now Dell EMC. As chairman, president, and CEO of EMC, Joe oversaw one of the largest mergers and acquisitions in the history of the technology industry. Today, Joe is currently chairman and co-founder of Bridge Growth Partners.
Welcome to today's CEO to CEO podcast, where we're going to explore M&A as a topic. And we're pleased today to have Joe Tucci of ex-EMC and Wang, and somebody who's done over billions of M&A transactions joining us. So, Joe, welcome to the CEO to CEO podcast.
Thanks, Kevin. It's my pleasure to be here.
So, Joe, over your career, you did literally billions in deals in M&A. What's your philosophy of what you're looking to achieve with M&A? And I know situations are slightly different, but what in general how do you think about M&A?
Well, I think of M&A in terms of growth. In this industry that you and I both love, the information technology industry, either you grow or you die. And you can't, even if you're stagnant, you're just going to have a slow death. So it's grow or die, and it's an unforgiving business. It's a great business, but an unforgiving business. And I always believe that you need dual innovation to grow, right? So innovation is the key to growth, and I always like a dual innovation strategy, which is what we called it at EMC. Of course, strategy number one, and the most important one, is that you have your own plans, your own organic technologies and services and people and go to market, and you want that to grow. And I think the best companies, and I mean the best companies, the enduring companies, have figured out how to keep that going, but also do an inorganic strategy, which is M&A, to help pop that growth.
And that's terrific. And when, so obviously it makes a little bit of difference of what your strategy is, but in general, when you were sorting through, I'm sure you sorted through hundreds of targets over the years. What were you looking for in, an M&A? What was the priority that you had when you were looking through a company?
Well, as you said, Kevin, you need to have your core strategy, and there's no substitute for that. And that has to be a growth core strategy, right? And of course, to do that, you got to build your team and your philosophies, your partners, your ecosystem, et cetera. Being all that said, I think one of the best pieces of work that I've read on this was done by Bain Consulting. And they did a thing about, you can grow in your core, and then they had rings of adjacencies, right? So there's one ring out, two rings out, three rings out, four rings out. And obviously the further rings you go, the more complex, the more hard it's going to be. And the most successful acquisitions are the ones you do in your core, okay? So, it's a lot, it says a lot more than that, but I try to simplify it for this podcast. I always followed that strategy beautifully. Not beautifully, but thoroughly. I'm not saying I did the best job at it, but I really believed in that. And again, you got to have a growth strategy for your core business. And then you got to know what I'm buying and where it fits in and how many rings of adjacency. And then you got to realize the further you go out from your core, the less chance it's going to be successful.
And how did you, when you acquired, for example, VMware, virtualization wasn't popular, right? So how did that come about in your strategy? What do you remember back as to what you were thinking about? You said, hey, this is good.
Exactly. EMC is a storage company. Then we changed it, but it was a storage company. So basically, when you think about storage, we were not a storage company. We were an external storage array company. In other words, you took all the data out of your servers and you put it in the central array that was accessed by all your servers. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we were. VMware, the core of VMware took data out. It's a different strategy today, but back then they took data out of each of the servers and they centralized it, which opened up billions and billions of dollars of market. If VM were successful, we would open up billions and billions of market to the EMC, which heretofore was not in our wheelhouse, right? We couldn't get at that storage that was stuck in the server. We had to take it out of the server. VMware did that very aptly. The second thing we saw today, this is a hell of a market because servers they're single core back then, and even in single core, the average utilization was less than 10%. And the number of applications that ran on a server was about 1.1. So therefore, there was not to stop that server sprawl and consolidate with bigger servers was going to be a huge market with a huge payback. So it actually got a great payback just on the storage consolidation that we could get at with our products. And then secondly, we had the core market of virtualizing the server itself, which, and they both work just as we saw. And that's what I saw at EMC. People ask me, did you see the cloud? Did you see this? Did you see that? And the answer is no. I saw those two things, and those two things made it very interesting to us. But again, the VMware, we did there, we started a second core, just to go back to that main work. And then we try to get synergies between the cores.
When you were looking at, you can waste a lot of money looking at a lot of targets, even the ones that were on target. Did you think, did you have some rules that you developed or your team developed that said, hey, if we, talk to the management team and they say X, Y, or Z, well then, forget it, it's not a good target?
We had a simple approach, and people find this hard to believe, but I believe it thoroughly, was we started with the people. So if we were going to, wanted to acquire a company or merge with a company, everyone acquire, some people like the term merge versus acquire, it doesn't really matter. But if we were going to make that company part of our company and our company relying on that company, we got to make sure that we like the people. Because there's nothing in IT which says, give me your technology and just, I don't want any of the people. So you got to understand, what am I after? Am I after technology? Am I after skilled people? Am I after a customer base? Am I after a partner ecosystem? You could acquire a company for any or all of those things. Right? So so basically, it all starts in my book with people. So do I like these people? We work hard. We work long. It's nice to work with somebody you like. So if these weren't our kind of people, and I use that word generally, that would throw up a huge red flag. Secondly, it was important that they saw life the same way we did, or similar. Like if we think we're moving north, and they say no, it's not north, it's northwest. That's fine. That's even better, because they might be real right. But if they said no, it's going south, and you want to go north, that's too far up the bridge. So I very strongly did we look at those two items. Right? Sounds kind of ABC-ish. But do we like the people, and do we like how they see the market and the potential in the market? If those two were true, we would go on to the other things, right? The due diligence, the dollars, and of course, save for last, but it's important to work out the social issues. If you want the people, the social issues are incredibly important. Where do I work? How do I work? What's my benefits? How long am I supposed to work? Who am I going to report to? That's what I'm referring to as social issues, right? But they're big in people's minds. So we always followed that time frame. We never said we're going to jump that. So, there's always A, B, C, D, E. And then, of course, do the due diligence. You got to do the homework. You got to send in teams to understand their people and their skills. You got to send in teams to understand their partners, their customers, their financials, the books, their strategies, et cetera. And you got to just do the work. And the biggest advice I always give my people is don't fall in love. At all costs, don't fall in love. Let's stay with our game plan, because you can fall in love with a target.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you make an excuse, that's nothing, that's nothing, and then you got big problems. And the last thing I recommend is you have a business owner. And I tried hard not to make that business owner me as CEO. But where's this product going to live in this company, right? If it's a new core, that's fine, then I get directly involved. But it's going to be part of the same core. You got to get your business leaders to buy in and sponsor this deal. It's just lonely at the top, and it'll get lonelier at the top.
Good advice. When you then decide you're going to put these together, of course, we always have either the board and, the street to discuss, and all mergers have synergies, whether they're revenue synergies or cost synergies, or in a lot of cases, both. And, the studies always say that, half of the deals that are out there fail to, achieve their synergies, and that's usually from a consultant who's trying to sell you, whatever their consulting is to help you with the synergies. But, from your perspective, and I know you guys leverage outsiders too, but what was your focus on how to get the synergies? What was your key blocking and tackling to make sure that you got the synergies that you were talking about?
Well, first of all, when we talk synergies, we talk both positive and negative synergies, and then revenue and cost synergies, right? And so it's like a 4-dimensional target. We think together our revenues should grow faster. What does that look like? We think we could take out this amount of duplicate cost. What does that look like? So it's always approached it from that angle. The biggest thing you got to know is sometimes you take a company and you dump it in the core, and it's like, for instance, you have a product, and you can always code what you want to put in that product, right? Like I came from a product background. We had a big service business too, but more product. But services, lines of services and services strategy is very similar. You can always do it yourself. So the question is, can I buy a lot of time to market? Can I buy a customer base? Can I buy, just to go through the same thing, can I buy people who understand this market better than our people? So that's going to be the key to success. But, a board is going to be your biggest asset and your biggest pain in the butt. Because they always want to say, okay, we just paid XX for this acquisition, keep reporting on it. And I used to tell them, look, if I keep it separate like VMware, obviously we can and we will do that. But sometimes, or even like an RSA for security, we can do that very easily. But when I take something and when I want the ingredients and I'm going to mix it in the EMC soup, right? And I'm getting new revs of the EMC soup out there, right? How do I know if it's that customer that's increasing my revenue, or the new version of the software, or whatever? So I used to tell the board is what you got to do then. I commit to say, have EMC grow X% faster. Just measure me on that, and don't ask me about that acquisition anymore, because that acquisition doesn't exist. It's in a million pieces. All the finances in finance, all the marketing in marketing, et cetera, right? And it's not a standalone. So you got to really define, and the investors are going to be the same way. You got to define to investors what's, as I call it, in the soup, and there you're going to report, hey, my soup's growing faster, from what is separatable, right? And you're going to start a new core, or several rings of far away of adjacency, and that you can report on, right? So but you can't. It's a waste of time to report on everything, which a lot of fellow board members don't get.
Great advice, and I think that is the challenge, is that you want to get integrated as quickly as you can and get going marketing, capturing the market as fast as you can.
I've said it several times, but usually when it boils down is you could do anything, right? Given time and money. But it's what about that time to market?
Right.
So, if you're going to code, like for instance, one of the best acquisitions EMC did was Data General to get their mid-tier storage business, because EMC was the king of the high-end storage business. And that worked really well. Now, that you could get people from that high-end storage business to build a whole new product, but you had a very successful high-growth product buried in this old company called Data General. So by buying that and splitting that out and making a mid-tier line faster, I think netted us billions of dollars in revenue and profit. So that's the key. So it's always going to be about time to market.
When you look back on it, any other acquisitions that you are particularly fond of, or you thought were ahead of their time? Obviously, VMware was ahead of its time. You just talked about the Data General. Anything else that pops to your mind?
Yeah, I think Data Domain, which really made us solid in a multi-billion-dollar adjacency called data protection. Some call it backup recovery, some call it business continuity. But that company really accelerated that business, and it was growing nicely before we bought it. And after we bought it, it just was on steroids. So I would say VMware for sure. Data Domain for sure, and Data General for sure. And I didn't do Data General. My first job when I came in as chief operating officer was to help integrate Data General. But just looking back at EMC in total, I think those were the three biggest. And there's a bunch of others, and some didn't work, quite frankly.
And when you look at those acquisitions, right, and look back on your career, what about the role of data in M&A and both the other customers' data and your data and how to put stuff together? Any reflections on, how data is important in this process?
The oldest axiom, I think, in information technologies, from data, one begets information. From information, one begets knowledge. And of course, when you're doing a acquisition, you want to make sure you know as much as you can.
Right.
So sometimes you're in a competitive bid, and the target is put forth the data room. Sometimes you're digging out your own data, and I do it. I really believe it's broad. It's data about the people, data about the DNA, data about the softer side as well as the hard side. I think they're both important. So data is all important. And of course, when you you're successful in the acquisition, you want to integrate the IT for sure. And of course, the long tail in the tent, the long pole in the tent, always ends up being how you get your data set up right. So that's useful to both companies, the old company, the one you acquired, and yourself.
So when it comes to IT integration and data integration, was your philosophy do it fast or do it slow?
My preach and belief is you want to be as accurate as you can, but I always believed you got to sacrifice some precision for speed, because if you don't go quickly, this fast-moving market that the IT market that you and I love, Kevin, has done nothing but accelerate through my 50-year career in IT, right? Nothing but accelerate. So if you go too slow, so you don't want to make mistakes, and you want to be, like the good carpenter, measure twice, cut once. But that being said, you got to be willing at the top to sacrifice some precision for speed, because again, the biggest thing you're trying to get is time to market for that product, for that service, for those go-to-market people, for whatever it is that strategically interested you in this company.
Joe, you were acquired at the end of your run of CEO at EMC by Dell in what's viewed as the largest transaction in the IT industry. So when you were the CEO and it was reverse, instead of acquiring, you were being acquired, what were you looking for in somebody to acquire your company?
You got three major constituencies that you're beholden to. Number one is your people, and I start with that number one. With your people, you want to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm giving them more opportunity. The second audience is your customers, and the key word there is care and feeding. You want to make sure they'll be properly cared for because they took a bet on you. They bought your products, they bought your services. You become a strategic, important part of their going forward business and maybe digital transformation. So is the care for those customers going to be there? Thirdly, and there's no order because it's A1, A2, A3, is your shareholders. Are they going to get a good and a fair return? Are they for it? Now, they get to vote on it ultimately, so that makes it a little bit different than the other two. But you always worry about those three constituencies. And again, it's opportunity, care, and dollars, so to speak, return. I think that's a great lens. Now, also, and you want to care about your partners if they were your people. Yeah, because you wouldn't be where you are if you didn't have some really good, dedicated partners in your ecosystem, and you want them to care about you, and you got to care about them. And then, of course, your last audience is the communities and where you work. And the Dell transaction kind of addressed all of those. I mean, I was convinced that there'd be enhanced growth, and with growth would come more opportunities. And the shareholders got to vote on it. It was overwhelmingly voted for positively. So I think they felt they were getting a good return. And customers, their customer satisfaction is very good today. So this is 3.5 years into the deal. So customers are still with us. They still believe in the company. And then the fourth one, the board got a benefit. They were looking for a successor. because unfortunately I got older and it's my time to turn it over. And Michael Dell's done a great stewardship, and he's a great CEO and a good leader, great leader.
It makes sense. And I think, sometimes the most straightforward and simple answers are the ones for people not trying to be over complicated. So the simple answers are what works the best. And, for a lot of transactions that you know of and I know of and that we've talked about that have failed, this one is viewed as highly successful. So between you and Michael and the corresponding management teams, you certainly got more right than you got wrong. In general, if somebody was looking to be acquired, what would you tell that CEO? Would you tell him just think about those, 3 or 4 angles, or do you have any other advice for a CEO that's looking to be acquired?
The best companies aren't looking to be acquired. They think they have a path, and they just, what we have to do is present them, you and I and others. I'm on your board, if those that don't know. Have to sell them on the opportunity together is much greater than the opportunity apart. And the CEO needs to be unselfish. It's not about him. It's not about you, Kevin. It's can we do, and again, back to those target markets. Is it a better opportunity for our customers? Is it more care for our customers? And is it our people? Is it more care for our customers? And is this going to benefit the shareholders? I mean, if you get a yes, yes, and yes, then you got to be an awful selfish person, guy or woman, not to want to proceed.
Well, I think you follow the same thing that you and I have talked about before, and that I've been trying to do, which is build a great company, and everything else will take care of itself. One
of my biggest beliefs, Kevin, is you should not do an acquisition to fix yourself. That's the primary road to failure. Fail fast if you do that. You got to put in the work and take your core business that you're running and get it fixed up and leaning in the right direction and starting to grow. Then you can layer in these acquisitions to hop that growth and make it grow faster. So that's something I would tell a CEO also. If your business is fundamentally broken, don't expect an acquisition to fix it. You're better off selling your business to somebody else, let them do it. But if you can get your business running in the right direction, M&A and dual innovation growth strategy, as innovation begets growth, if you do it right, is going to serve you well. So it's kind of trite, but that's what I would say to any CEO. I believe it.
Joe, a lot of good advice this afternoon that I think people are going to really enjoy listening to. Is there anything I didn't ask you about M&A that you'd like to impart to us as we wrap up?
Eventually, it comes down to the hard work of integration, Kevin. And that comes in planning and people buying into the vision. So again, to CEOs, I'd say it can't be your vision. It's got to be our vision being the company. Its partners, its customers. And when that happens, great things will happen, and everybody will double down and get that integration work done fast. Because there's always some, and again, that integration should have synergies, and the synergies should be focused on as much as cost. Everybody focuses on cost. There are very few companies that miss their cost synergies, but a lot of companies miss their revenue synergies. And there's also dis-synergies too. And you got to make sure you put them in the pot too, because it's impossible to do some of these things having a little bit of speed for precision without breaking something or bending something, and you got to allow for that. So what are your revenue synergies, what are your cost synergies, and what is your dis-synergies? And then that's how you formulate your plan. How you're going to measure it. You want to measure the entire thing, which you do in a tight integration. If you're going to an adjacency, you could probably please your board and your shareholders by giving them more information on how that particular unit is doing. But make up your mind, have your team totally coalesce behind it, and pick the right kind of people that you want to be part of your team, because you worked hard. I know Kevin worked very hard on the DNA aspects of the company, and you should be very proud. Syniti's great, really well positioned for success.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks for spending time with us today. And for the audience, thanks for joining us, and look forward to the next CEO to CEO podcast.
Thank you, Kevin, for having me.
Thank you for joining the CEO to CEO podcast. Join us next time as we uncover data strategies to support mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures with the world's top CEOs.